rise of Google.
Dun, 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 dun. Dun, dun, dun.
Awesome. So we're going to talk a little bit today about Google and how we got googly here in Connecticut. And I think all three of us here have a little bit of a piece of the history when it comes to Google. I could age myself right now and say that back when kids didn't have Google accounts, I used Edmodo as a classroom teacher, and I made every single one of my seniors walk into the computer lab, sign up for a free Google account, and log into the Edmodo class. And yes, I am going on record saying that I did that. And no, I shouldn't have done that. And no, none of you should do that either. But back then there was no real direction, and kids didn't have Google accounts, and there was no EdLaw 2D, and nobody really knew, what you could or couldn't do.
Says the director of technology.
Yeah, well, am I not accurate in saying that there was
You are 100% accurate.
Thank you. So there were no real rules back then. It was kind of like the wild, wild west of the internet.
Took the words right out of my mouth.
Yeah.
I was about to say that.
It's true.
Wild
It
West.
really is true. And you didn't know what was right or wrong or indifferent. Thankfully now, or maybe some of you feel that it's not thankful, but thankfully for me, there is a lot of guidelines and a lot of guidance. And unfortunately, that means that the no cat has to come out every now and again. But one of the only good results of what, kind of what came out of that wild, wild west is that we do have Google Enterprise now as a district. And like I said, all three of us here had a little piece in the hand of that. Kevin is the, the Google admin for the district. He kind of works with Victoria and I on all things Google, as well as, the rest of the upper management guys have Google admin access as well. But Kevin has, since I've come on the job, Kevin has really been my point person. I'm sure he loves hearing his phone ring from me about 7,000 times a day with regard to all things Google. What's on, what's off? Why is this person experiencing this problem? But, we could have, let's start first with, I think I'd love to hear a little bit from Victoria about, her history and when she came into the district and how we kind of onboarded on the instructional end with Google.
Yeah, so I think you did a good introduction with the Edmodo piece, because when I came into district as a BOCES employee, it was everyone secretly had their kids sign up for Google or they were using Edmodo. And then we did a science pilot, which I believe we spoke about in a previous track, where some of the science teachers received access. And because it was so new to us, we just wanted to see how things were going, what was beneficial, what was not beneficial, and take things from there instead of just releasing it out to everyone, which I think was a really smart move. And then from there, it was kind of like, okay, we're in a good place with that pilot. Now it's word of mouth. And then, I went into department meetings, staff meetings, got partnered up with you, Alise.
Yay!
And we did some work
if
with
we
the
had
mentoring.
more time, Victoria, we could tell that story, but there's just not enough time for that on this podcast.
I think most of everyone knows our funny story by now, but that's okay.
Yeah.
So we did a lot of work with the mentoring program with the new teacher academy, and the new teachers coming in received training on Google platforms. That led into formal summer trainings where we had Let's Get Googly series. And then that led us really to the pandemic, where it was not so much a choice, because until the pandemic, it was really a choice. And some people saw the benefits of Google, and some people were just like, I'm just going to stick to my own thing, which, I totally understand. But I think, once you're home, and we weren't able to go out anywhere, and all these things were going on, it was, okay, well, how am I getting my assignments across to all these students without emailing a ton of emails and attaching things that may not go through because they're too large? The files are too large. So that ends, a brief few minutes, I think recaps from 2015 until 2020.
Yeah. I mean, listen, we have come a long way, right? I mean, we've come a long way. And the road was not always, covered in flowers and happiness. There was a lot of learning, I think, on the part of really all of us, right? So there was the learning on the part of the IT team, even long before I came on to be with them. There was the learning on the part of Victoria and I, and there's just constant learning. I think part of this job and part of what we do in the field of technology is that every day you have to prepare yourself kind of like to wake up every day to something being different, and there's two kind of like ways to look at that, right? So you could look at that and be afraid of that, or you could look at that and be refreshed by that, right? And in the beginning, I think I was a little afraid of it. I think I said, like, how can I do this job effectively if every day I come into work and something is different? And at first it gave me a little bit of hesitation, like, can I do this? And that's just complete candidness, right? That's just being honest. And the more I came to look at it, the more I said, heck yes, I can do this, because how cool is my job? How refreshing is it to feel like it's never going to be the same thing every day? How awesome is it to feel like every day I have something new I can share, I have something new I can teach, and I have something new that someone is teaching me, because Deborah Smith, I know you're out there listening, and there's something that you teach me every single day. And I think as long as you have this kind of mentality of open learning and the desire to learn all the time, this is a good place to be. And loving technology becomes easier when you get your mind around the fact that it's always going to be different. And I'll kind of let Kev talk a little bit about that, because I know that when he logs in to the Google admin dashboard, literally there's a toggle that was toggled one way one day, and then he's got another option the next day, and we have to make a decision on like what we're doing.
I don't know what you're talking about. No, I'm kidding. So yeah, it's just every day is a new adventure. For me, it was a little overwhelming, like in the beginning, trying to like learn all the stuff. I mean, we physically like wired up carts. This is obviously before the pandemic. We were prepping Chromebooks. We were scanning them in, and this is even before we were working on a Google Sheet to keep track of them, to assign them. I think you mentioned how we were doing department carts and things like that. That was prior to the, I guess, like you guys were saying, to the pandemic. But in the like admin console and stuff, yeah, things are constantly changing. They keep. It's good because they keep adding features that we keep mentioning, like, oh, it'd be nice if they did this. So they're listening to the feedback of users and things like that. Yeah, it can be overwhelming. Still, but trial and error is seems to be the way of keeping up with it. Plus the blog, which we've mentioned before.
Oh, tell them a little bit about the blog, Kevin.
So Google does have a workspace update blog, workspaceupdates.google.com. What that is actually, it actually gives you an insight as to some of the features that are down the road or potentially being released into the admin console. Some of the features we have enabled, some we haven't. They tend to roll them out in slow little waves. So like right now.
So those of you out there listening where you were like, oh, this person next to me has this feature, like changing of the backgrounds in Google Meet, but you didn't. We had nothing to do with that. Even us on the back end used to log in. There were days that Victoria would log in and have something that I wouldn't have, and the very next day I would have it. It's because of the way that they roll out their updates.
Yeah, so there's tons of obviously features that we're not necessarily using right now. Mm-hmm. Not because we don't want to, but it's just, is it really helpful in our scenarios? So here right now I'm just looking at it while obviously we're recording this, and like the first thing here, better sharing options for appointment schedules, things like that. But that's like for a calendar. They basically just bullet point different things. I'm quickly scrolling through this to see if there's something that I could actually talk about while we're recording this that may affect everybody. That's contacts. No,
I mean, I could talk from the instructional side just a little bit with the updates. And like Alise said, like we were on a Google Meet and she had backgrounds and I didn't. And I was like, yo, this isn't fair. But you're gonna all experience that, especially with like Google Forms. As you know, Google Forms only has a few amount of fonts. I think there's like 5 fonts or something to choose from. They're going to be adding in new fonts. I think sometime in July, so this month. So hopefully by August everyone will have them. But it's stuff like that where it's keep changing, but then you can't, ask the person that you teach with or next door because they might not have it yet. But eventually, um, it all comes
You know who you
together.
could always ask? Victoria.
July
What?
19th, it looks like. Full
July
rollout.
19th.
1 to
There you
3
go.
days for feature visibility starting on July 19th, 2022. As you mentioned it, I actually found that post in the blog, and they posted it June 28th is when they like made the announcement on the
Yeah.
blog. Yeah, it's pretty cool actually.
And for those of you that look at this, like, or if you're going to start looking at it now that we've told you about it, the key piece to look at here is where it says end user. Really, that's how you'll know if you'll be impacted, because a lot of this really, a lot of what you see on the blog is really just things that Kevin can do in order to enhance some things on the back end, but it may not have necessarily an impact on you. But if you read the section that says end user, you'll know if you have, an actual impact. And they have little videos and little, screenshot pictures that they take and put in there, which is a cool little feature. But for those of you Google geeks out there, if you want to bookmark this to your CCSD bookmarks and add it in, you would be able to, see this and kind of take a look at what's going. We don't always, sometimes we don't turn a toggle on because we don't know how it would impact you, and we do a little, research into what we're deciding to implement, and some of the things we don't have a choice on, some of the things we have to make a decision on. So it varies.
There you go. Here's another cool little thing. Picture-in-picture and multi-pinning available for Google Meet.
Oh, we can't wait for that.
Yeah, it might be. Let's see. Is it here yet?
Very cool.
I think it might be out already. It looks like the rollout started in the middle of June. So sometimes it takes some time to propagate.
We're all gonna have to get on a Google Meet to find it to find out.
Yeah.
Yeah, tell them what we're using right now. Tell them what we're using.
I don't want to tell them that we're not using Google. I want to let them know. We are using Skype because of the recording capabilities are a little bit different with regard to recording and editing this podcast. But
don't tell
How
anyone.
embarrassing. How embarrassing.
Listen, Google, but this is a really good point to make, right? Google is not the end all be all of everything, right? So yes, of course, we all here, sitting here talking, are huge, huge supporters of Google. I don't know how I would operate without it in my daily life, but that doesn't mean that it's the only thing that I use, And I think that's a good point, and I think that's a lot of what we try to, as a department, kind of put out there, is that our way isn't always the best way. One platform is not necessarily better than another. And, we kind of have to keep an open mind and an open heart as to what we are using out there, because it's not just one pathway to take. There's a number of pathways to take, and whatever works better for Victoria might not always work best for Alise. Shocker. But that means we can do it 2 different ways and be okay.
Are you sure about that?
I'm not sure, but I'm saying it.
I think one other feature update that I did want to mention, and it kind of coincides with the instructional side and IT, so this is actually really exciting, is the add-ons that Google Classroom is going to be having. So basically, just like you can add on extensions and all of that within Google Classroom, we're going to be able to sync up Nearpod and all of these different programs that we have in district. And that's going to be sometime in the fall. I think Google's releasing it, so I don't know when we will technically be able to, take a look at that. But I think that is very cool, only because then you don't have to have a million tabs up, go to the site, and then link it to your Google Classroom. You can just go in through Google Classroom, click on Nearpod, and then do it, whatever you have to do. And grading is supposed to be a little easier with add-ons as well. So you won't have to go into Nearpod, for example, grade, and then figure out how you're going to merge that grading in Google Classroom. It's going to be pretty seamless.
It's almost as though it's not almost, it is that everything that we saw coming out of the pandemic, I'm like, well, this doesn't work with this, or it would be better if they did it this way. I mean, they've literally taken every single end user's suggestion and they've made it happen over time.
Right.
And really, it may seem like a long time, but if you really think about it, 2020 to 2022 to make all of these enhancements, I mean, this worked quick. This worked really quick.
Right.
I think it also gave the companies the time to say, like, how can we step up our game? Because, like, everyone was like a level playing field. They weren't really doing, going above and beyond. They were like, hey, this works. People love it. We're going to, like, sustain. But then from the pandemic, everyone was using it pretty much every day. So that was their opportunity to say, like, oh, okay, like, what can we do to be even better? And that's why I think we're seeing all these changes.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's, Google. I mean, let's just talk Google for a hot second. And I don't know how many of the listeners know that much about Google. And it's funny because TJ, one of the technicians, I had never seen the movie. It's The Intern, right?
Oh, yeah.
So I had never seen the movie The Intern. And every time I'd walk around stealing Victoria's line of
What happened? The heck?
It's the winking, yeah. The computer just winked at us. It's okay. But every time, I'll explain later. Every time we talk about Let's Get Googly, or I would steal Victoria's line of Let's Get Googly, TJ would say to me, have you ever seen The Intern? And I had never watched it. And then finally one weekend, TJ texted me and he said, The Intern is on whatever it was, TNT or something like that. So I turned it on, and it has one of my all-time favorites, Vince Vaughn, and it is hysterical, and it's about Vince Vaughn, and what's the other guy's name? Another comedian. I forget his name.
What, Owen Wilson?
Owen Wilson.
Yeah.
And they are interning at Google. And the cool part is that I actually found an article on how many, what actually happens in that movie and if it's actually accurate. And for those of you, I don't want to spoil the movie. However, there are slides that the people that work at Google are like sliding down slides to get from one floor to another. And what I read in that article is that it is in fact accurate, that there are slides, I believe, in the California Google office to get from level to level. But just working for Google, if you learn about Google, and actually I hate to say it, but Vince Vaughn and his epic comedic performance in that movie is what really got me to go into the history and the background of Google. Very cool stuff what it is to work there.
Do you know what their company snack is? Anyone?
No.
We like snackies over in IT, so tell us.
No, they have a company snack. Swedish fish.
Oh, wow.
So I feel like potentially in all of the annexes of technology, I need to start putting out bowls of Swedish fish just so that we're really getting googly. That's what I'm reading off of this.
I'm just putting it out there that they have a company snack.
When's the district installing the slides?
I know.
Wait, no, and then to get from like one part of the campus to another, they have the Google bikes, which I have like a miniature version of.
Yeah, yep, in your office, that I know.
Yeah.
So I think
in summary, Alise has to buy bikes, slides, and Swedish fish.
Add it to the list of things I need to get for everybody. But I think one of the coolest things I actually learned from Victoria when her and I started working together was that Google started out as a productivity tool completely. Like it wasn't, it's just out there to make people more productive. And I think in truth, even with all of this exponential growth that they've had, they still serve that purpose 100% every day, all the time. You know what I mean? With every enhancement that they do, they really are helping people become more productive in all areas of every single one of their pieces of the pie in the workspace. They're out there making students, teachers, people in the business world, they're making you be more productive, which I think if you really take a look at Google in its true essence, like its ability to make you work smarter, not harder, and its ability to save you time if you just take the time to learn every little nuance, like the time you're devoting in the learning process on the front end pays you back exponentially on the back end over and over again. Because I think about it, I'm going to age myself again, like a dinosaur. But, I think about ways I was an English teacher for all those years, and we had to do like a final, right? So we had to make an English 11, or English 11 was the Regents, but an English 12 final or midterm. And how many times, like, we would actually print a Word document and like pass it off to the other two people to like make the edits on the paper, give it back. I mean, this was a weeks-long process. And now we're able to, the teachers for their finals are able to just literally not even be in the same room working at the same time, or, working in the same hemisphere of the world. And they're able to live time edit work on a final exam, and the amount of time that's shaved off of something that seems so simplistic, right? Just collaborating on a midterm or a final, the way in which we're able to save time, that's time you get back that you otherwise would have had to be in person doing, or wait for the freaking paper trail. Can we edit that?
What? What did you do?
No? All right.
You said freaking. Who cares?
Okay. Well, it came out naturally. Awkward pause. All right. So I think as we're coming to the end, now is the time to come to the end of the Google segment. I think part of what our discussion point for this week is going to be is I would love you guys to do your own little KWL chart, and I want to know, like, what do you know about Google? Like, what do you feel like you are passionate about in the world of Google? What do you want to know about Google? Like, what do you feel like is still out there? What piece of the pie? What part of the Google workspace, whether it be on the back end, the front end, whatever it is, what more do you feel like you can learn about Google in order to kind of like really help you along in your process, your teaching and learning process? And what did you learn from today? So we're going to put together a little KWL for you guys. And then we will, as we get to the end of this podcast, we'll take what we got from that KWL and circle back into it in that column for what you want to know. Whatever you guys list that you want to know, we're going to go back and we're going to...
yeah, we can like dive into so much stuff.
Yeah, we can dive really into a lot. So I would...
Like even on the back end, like how we push stuff out. That's very granular.
Yeah.
It's like people don't realize how granular it is.
Yeah, and it's very cool. Even like we didn't even really talk about the Google extensions and add-ons and like how we go about that. So there's a lot that we can go into. I mean, it would be podcasting forever, which I hope that we are going to be doing. But, let's start, as I keep being told by these two, start small, start small. We're not putting it out on, what?
Baby steps.
It's not out on Audible yet.
Power of yet.
Not yet.
All right, so that's it for the rise of Google.
Dun, 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 dun.
And we'll see you next week.